it was very uncomfortable initially because nobody knew me as a realtor. And so I was just like, listen, this is what I'm doing. I'm not embarrassed about it. Um, it's an amazing service that I offer. And I just didn't give a fuck.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Adam Brawer. Adam has over a decade producing film and TV in Los Angeles and then pivoted to luxury real estate. He sells high-end homes to celebrities, entertainment figures, and entrepreneurs. Adam, I'm sure there is a ton to this and I'm excited to hear the stories, but I first just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on the show today. We we tried to record this right around the time of the fires in LA, and we both live in LA, so got pushed back. But I'm glad we were able to get it scheduled. And thanks again for making this happen.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Let's start with telling people your background. Tell them about yourself. Kind of that a bit about where you were, when you transitioned into real estate, and I'm sure there's a lot of intertwined stories there. So we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, well, I moved out to LA almost 21 years ago to work at the William Morris Agency. My dream initially was to be a music agent, and spent a couple years there. Jumped into development at Fremantle Media, the producers of American Idol, America's Got Talent, a bunch of other game shows. And from there, I co founded a production company producing mainly film and some television. And I always, my entire identity was a producer. And right around the Me Too movement, I had a series of big catastrophes, I would say. Unfortunately, I was in business with several people, both male and female, who were Me Too'd. And the last person, I had Amber Heard's next film after Aquaman, which Aquaman was $1 billion film. We sold this movie to Amazon in a pretty big deal, took it to Cannes. I was in Paris location scouting when she got blacklisted and nobody would work with her, unfortunately, and the movie fell apart. And I had almost an existential crisis where I had my identity wrapped up in this company, all of my money wrapped up in this company, a few films back to back dying at the 2 yard line, and then this movie exploding. And I took a solo trip to Iceland to clear my head, kind of think things through and figure out what I wanted to do next. And I had no idea. I just knew that I wanted to get out of the film business. I had no idea what I would actually do. And I sought some advice from friends, and the blaring suggestion was to get my real estate license. So I dove right in, got my license quickly, and December 2019, got in the game. And I had no idea what I was doing, didn't have any experience at all. I did have a good network, though. And so
Sure.
slowly, surely, not slowly, very quickly, actually, I learned in patches. I kind of learned on a need to know basis. And in a short amount of time, in the first couple months, I got my first listing, and COVID started very shortly after that. And I thought, wow, my timing's horrific. But my timing was actually phenomenal. They dropped the
Yeah.
rates, and I
Yeah.
sold a lot of homes my first year, and I just never looked back. The movie industry shut down that year, but real estate took
Mhm.
off. So that was sort of my entree into the business. It was a trial by fire. I burned all the boats, didn't have a backup plan, had to succeed, and I succeeded. And I've moved on. I moved my first listing was a 4 bedroom, $600,000 house in like Canoga Park. And next week I list a $50 million, 21,000 square foot home in Beverly Hills.
Which is that's an impressive escalation, but also like for people that don't live here, that is kind of the reality of LA and the parts, and that there's you can have quite a different especially in the real estate game, quite a different clientele in one area versus another. So yeah, so much interesting there. And I think that, you're, as a producer, that's unique, maybe less unique around LA, but like unique in general to um, people on my podcast, but not necessarily like what you experienced in having some challenges faced in your career path, and something that essentially forced you to exit it is not unlike someone being laid off from what you might think of, a regular job, right? It's just a bit of a different circumstances, so that's not entirely different. So I think there is a lot of relatable stuff here, and the trip to Iceland. It's maybe odd, but I kind of want to start there only because many times when someone has something like this in their career, where they for whatever reason have to exit that career or put it on hold, you went on a solo trip to Iceland. What was the thinking behind that? What was sort of your reasoning to do that specific thing? Because I think some sort of reset is important, on a personal level. And so I just kind of want to hear that story and how that sort of came to be.
Great question. So, in my life, not much has gone according to plan. And that's the same with this story. So, I was in Paris, got the terrible news, went to the airport, went to Charles de Gaulle, fly back to LA. And Charles de Gaulle specifically has a 100% firm deadline. If you're not at the airport checked in at least 2 hours before your international flight, there's 0% chance you're getting checked in. I talked to every I was there like an hour and 58 minutes. Seriously. I talked to every
Yeah.
supervisor. Not happening. So I just sat there. It was the last direct flight to LA of the day. And I was like, you know what? Why am I rushing to fly back to LA to deliver bad news to everybody?
Mhm.
I'm in Europe right now. Let me take advantage. Let's see what else is available. And I just jumped on the line with a travel agent and, figuring out some options. But I wanted to fly that night because I didn't want to go back, get another hotel in Paris. So nailed it down to Reykjavik. It was the summer, beautiful time. And I was like, okay, let me clear my head. Let me get some solo time so I can do some thinking without any distractions at all. And I jumped on a tour, and I remember sitting in a fjord just solo. I didn't know anybody there, obviously. And I'm sitting in a fjord just without any answers. And I actually spoke to the universe. I said, you know, I really need some help right now. I don't know what I'm doing, don't have the answers, kind of clueless. Give me some signs. I'm open. I'm available. I really need some assistance here. And when I got really quiet, I was like, okay, well, as a producer, you wear so many different hats. You're an entrepreneur, you're a negotiator, you are a pitch artist. My strength was going into the studios and selling them ideas and having them pay for it. And so I said, okay, well, I can definitely sell. What else could I sell? And I thought, well, homes are probably the biggest ticket items. So I spoke to my college roommate who got into real estate just outside of college and talked to my friend who signed me up at Equinox, who also had a real estate license, who was back in New York doing real estate. And they said, get your license. Worst case scenario, you do your own deal when you buy. And so, no other great options. Got my license, was not excited about it. I was just kind of resigned to this in the meantime fate, and also very anxious, concerned, because I would have to recreate myself. I'd have to, reintroduce myself to the community now as a realtor,
Yeah.
which would be odd and elicit a ton of
Mhm.
questions and potentially embarrassing because I'm admitting defeat. And so I, got my license quickly and happened to sign up with Rodeo Realty. I got the only brokerage letter I got that was wet signed by a human being was by Rodeo Realty in the Palisades, which just burned, unfortunately. And the sales manager, great guy, Mark Chorin, French guy, plays tennis. I play tennis. We got along well. He offered me an office as a brand new agent. The timing was great. Like, that their office was kind of thin, and he offered me one-on-one mentorship 3 times a week, a couple hours a day, and great, wonderful decision. And that's, yeah, that was sort of my origin story into real estate.
It's so uh, you mentioned mentorship. You mentioned sort of burning the boats. You mentioned it's funny because, like I said, it's a unique backstory, but a lot of this a lot of these themes carry through on almost all of the guests, and then also my own life. That these are the things that kind of allow you to be successful in multiple different spaces. Because I think it's that resiliency that you showed, the willingness to take a chance, take a risk, do something different, but then go and find a mentor to help you kind of navigate that early time. And I think that's just like you literally could take that that recipe, that playbook, and put it in a lot of different scenarios. You also mentioned earlier, kind of you had the network,
Yes.
and that can be maybe a positive and a negative. As you mentioned, you do have to reinvent yourself to people that know you as a producer, and now you say, okay, I'm going to be selling homes, and
Yeah.
embarrassing or not embarrassing, I kind of get where you're coming from. I think the it's a lot of times it's just describing ourselves as something different to
Hmm.
someone that knew us as the previous identity is a scary thing. So ha- talk about that a little bit. Talk about your experiences there. I think it's not easy for anyone. So I'd be really interested to hear your experience and like what you did to kind of overcome that transition.
Yeah. Well, I remember years ago, I was working with a really big, successful studio producer, wonderful guy, um, who's totally honest. And, he told me, he was like, listen, the movie industry has gone in a really bad direction for producers. Not in my opinion, objectively. It's not a good place to be. It's not the way it was in the 90s. And so he told me, he said, listen, when I got into the business, I was living big, you know, had like 7 figures a year from the studio, blah, blah, blah. The industry's changed. I continued living big. This is his words. And I got to a place where I couldn't afford to pay my property taxes. Then I had liens on my house and, you know, blah, blah, blah. He said, I've considered getting into real estate. We were sort of commiserating a couple years before I decided, maybe a year before decided to get into real estate. And so I thought back about that. And in terms of reinventing myself, one of the first things that I did, I had only recently gotten on social media and I did a story with my open house sign. And I said, it was like the first week in January. And I was, I wrote something about like, hey, I'm hosting an open house this weekend. And people were like, wait, what? You're doing what? And I was like, oh, you didn't know that I had my real estate license? Of course they didn't know. But I sort of just played it off. And they were like, no, I didn't know you got your real estate license. I was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I had gotten it like the last month, but it was actually last year, technically. so, so I was like, I got it last year. And I just kind of like, I didn't make any announcements. I didn't do an email newsletter. It was just kind of like, I was just like, this is what is happening. And certain people, I mean, a friend who I actually a couple years ago sold him his house, Amazon executive, like senior guy, was like, he called me up. He's like, what do you put on your business card? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, what, like producer, realtor? And I was like, oh, I'm not a producer anymore. And he was like, you're not a producer anymore? I was like, no, I'm a realtor. And he was just like, okay. And I just didn't let people tried to poke holes in my armor. A lot of people.
Yeah.
They were like, what is going on? I was like, what do you mean is going on? I'm selling luxury estates. Are you looking to buy? and I was just like, hey, this is a boundary. You cannot cross this boundary. This is what I'm doing. And you're welcome to be part of the party or not. It's your choice. And
Yeah.
timing was great. So I didn't have to have that many conversations because very shortly thereafter, I was listing homes and they were coming into them. And then the conversation was over. Then I was
Yeah.
helping them buy homes. So it was very uncomfortable initially because nobody knew me as a realtor. And so I was just like, listen, this is what I'm doing. I'm not embarrassed about it. It's an amazing service that I offer. And I just didn't give a fuck pretty much. And that was very extremely helpful. Like I was not available for any judgment. And if there was judgment, I'm not available to have you in my life, pretty much.
Yeah. It, yeah. I mean, I love that. I love how you framed it because I think that the reality is it's going to be uncomfortable. It doesn't
Yeah.
like it's going to be uncomfortable, but you have to own it. And, you know, you can, I guess it's like not giving a fuck is almost, I think that you probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think that we do, but
Yes.
we have to decide not to in the sense, you know what I mean? Like we have to yes, you might care and be embarrassed or whatever, you know, whatever it is. Like you might have some level of feelings about people acting like whatever your new job, career, role is not right because they knew you as something else, and you have to do it anyway, and you have to, you know, kind of own it like you did. And one thing that you said that struck out to me is the you providing a phenomenal service, and I
Yes.
think that's like such a key piece, especially when it comes to sort of transitioning a career identity. It's like be so good at the new thing that they can't ignore that you're doing the
Yeah.
new thing because you're going to be the
Exactly.
best at it. And it's like,
100%.
yeah, if you half-ass it, yeah, no, everybody's going to think, oh yeah, that's you were this and you're just doing this new thing because of whatever. But I mean, it's a very interesting thing, and I'm trying to think of like, do I know other people? So I don't know if you know Mikey Taylor or have heard of Mikey Taylor, seen him on. So he is a former pro skateboarder,
Hmm.
turned city councilman of Thousand Oaks, or maybe it's Westlake Village, but like Ventura County, some one of the big cities in Ventura County, turned pretty large scale real estate syndicator and investor, and it's he's talked a bit about on his social media and podcast like that it was a weird thing too. It's like everybody knew him as a skater, like he wasn't just and it, I think you could argue that being a skater doesn't didn't always hold with it, you know, the level of prestige that you might think. But it's like you can look at him, you can look at Rob Dyrdek, who's like an incredible entrepreneur now and like incredibly successful. He was a skater. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter where you end up. It's just be as good as you possibly can be at that new thing. Don't approach it yourself any differently than you did. I'm sure, you strove to be the best producer that you can be. Now you're going to be the best realtor that you can be, and just if you do that, then the transition is fine. It doesn't matter what people think about that piece. What did
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned 2020 was initially, I mean, it was scary for everybody, but scary particularly in the real estate space, what's going to happen. Um, and so there was an initial pause, but then really what happened is kind of everything blew up for the next couple of years until rates changed, and we'll get to that. I want to ask I want to ask about that time period as well. But when that was happening, how did that? You said you went from the $600,000 house in Canoga Park to uh, multi-million-dollar Beverly Hills estate. Was that network based? Was that just that's how the real estate sales industry was at that moment? Like what's your perspective from how that went?
So I'll go back to my first listing in Canoga Park. There was an agent. So, when I first got in the business in December 2019, I didn't know how to get clients. And so I spoke to a title agent and a title officer, and I said, I'm looking to sit some open houses. Like, who are the most successful agents? And he gave me a list of like the top dozen or so agents. And I called all of them, had a number of conversations. Most didn't call me back. Um, and one guy I sort of clicked with, and he was just like, "Hey, let's." We actually spoke the day of like the holiday party, and Rodeo Realty, and we met up, and he invited me to join his team. I had no idea what that. I literally had no idea what that meant. I was like, "What does that even mean?" And so I started sitting his open houses, and a few weeks later, he said, "Listen, a friend of mine's wife is looking to sell her house in Canoga Park. She has her real estate license. I had a brief conversation with her, but she's never sold a house before, doesn't really know what she's doing, and she's open to co-listing it." And I said, "Well, what would that deal look like?" And he said, "Well, she would take 80% of the commission, and you and I would split 20." And I said, "Wait a second. You're telling me if I go out and get this listing, I'm going to take 10% of 2.5%? So I'm going to make like $1,000?" And he said, "Yes, but trust me, it'll lead to more business." I didn't have any listings. So I said, "Sure." So on the day of, I'm driving out there, it's 20 minutes before the appointment, and I call this agent and I'm like, "Hey, are you going to be there on time?" He's like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm not showing up. Like, I'm not able to make it." And I've never been on a listing appointment before. So I'm like, "Okay, well, I don't even have a presentation and it's just me." Okay. So I park the car, psych myself up, walk into the house like I own it, and gave her like a half baked pitch on how I would price it, how I would roll it out, timing, all the stuff. And she bought it. And I said, I was like, my photographer could be here Wednesday or Thursday afternoon. What day is better? And she said, Wednesday. So I knew the second I booked a photographer, it was my listing because I own the photos. So I was like, okay, cool. We got an offer before the first open house. I priced it very, very, very well. And at the first open house, I get there 15 minutes early. There are, legitimately 20 people waiting in front trying to get in. And I've never hosted, I mean, I'd hosted open houses, but never one for myself. And I was like, wow, this is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
A couple comes in and they're like, "Listen, we love the house. We're ready to offer full price." And I said, "I just want to let you know, we just got an offer that's above full price, and the owner is about to say yes. So I'm so sorry, but just really honest. I don't think you'll be able to get this one." And they really appreciated the honesty. They called me that night. They said, "Hey, thank you so much for being transparent with us. Our mom is looking to sell her house, very close by. Would you be open to selling it for her?" I was like, "Would I be open to? I would love to." So I ended up listing that house. Then they said, "We're not working with an agent and we're still looking to buy a house." So I helped them buy a house, helped their mom sell a house. A few months later, these are not big deals. These are like 800 grand. Then their cousin was looking to buy a condo. A couple months later, helped them buy a condo. And so momentum started to turn. And I became passionate about what I was doing. It was exciting. It was fast. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had sovereignty. I wasn't waiting on an actor to make a decision. I was moving the market and helping trade assets. And so then I started to get listings solo, like pretty good ones. I got like an incredible, 7-bedroom Italian villa. It was in North Hollywood, but spectacular estate. And then I realized, okay, as a realtor, you can be creative. I brought in, great photographers and started writing listing descriptions, started creating content. And then word just got out. Like people started talking about me and opportunities started to flow towards me. I didn't end up in Beverly Hills immediately. I mean, I sold a decent home in Bel Air like fairly quickly, which, an agent allowed me to sit in open house. Buyers came in, I co-rep the buyer. Um, and I just was 100% available. So like, at any time I was available, like I made it my top priority. I would show property at 8 a.m. I'd show property at 7 p.m. Um, and as things, as rates dropped and buyer demand grew, I became extremely busy. And it took me a while to get into luxury. I mean, I sold my first $5 million house about 18 months in. And that was a big win at that time. It was a new construction in Manhattan Beach. That house today is probably worth 7, I'd say. Um, so it took some time, but then I realized, okay, well, all I really need to do is phenomenal work for clients and then allow them to do my marketing for me. And they would tell their friends. I like calling it a fabled level of service that's so good they can't help but talk about it. And that's when my business became an incoming call business and things shifted dramatically. And I would start to get new opportunities, opportunity to sell a winery, opportunity to sell, a $25 million Malibu estate. And then today, opportunity to sell a stunning, palace in Beverly Hills. But it's taken a lot of time. I mean, not a lot of time, but it's taken a lot of consistency over time to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to that, just providing a service that can't be ignored. It really is, if you can get to that point where uh, people are marketing you essentially, which is sounds like what you've done. Like that's great. You do all the marketing things, but really what you want is for people to be telling your their friends that, oh, Adam, yeah, he listed my house. It was amazing. Everything went perfect. We got, like you just want them to be able to talk about you in that sort of context, and so that they're like, well, that's what I want. That I want that same experience when I sell my house or when I buy a house or whatever the case may be. And you mentioned, part of your decision to get into real estate sales is because you can sell. You pitched, studios as a producer and things like that. And I think it's a I don't know that it's an underrated skill, but it is a skill that maybe isn't always recognized. Like when you until you have to make that transition, right? I think a lot of people don't necessarily see how valuable their sales backgrounds or skills might be until they're like, oh, I'm going into real estate. I have to actually be, a marketer. I have to, and so it's visibility and its performance. I think are really the two things that um, make it so effective. The 2020, mid 2020, 2021, early 2022, really, really great time in real estate. I think a lot of people were fortunate to have a lot of success in that time.
Yes.
Mid 2022, we started to see rates go up substantially. It changed. Well, it changed a lot in a lot of sectors of real estate. How did that look for you? Especially, I don't know, what that does to the luxury market. That's obviously a different level of clientele. But how did things go for you? Come, I guess, mid 2022.
So I'd like to say that the first while I worked hard my first couple years, I was what's called like an accidental realtor, where I didn't really have systems in place. I did have a newsletter, but I didn't really have systems in place. So it was just like, oh, you're looking to buy, let me help.
Mhm.
Figure it out. Boom. It
Yeah.
was just kind of like I was playing checkers, but I wasn't playing chess. It was like transaction to transaction, no business plan really. And
Yeah.
so let's say later spring 22, I remember there were like, I had one deal specifically where we rate locked the day after rates went up, and I got like the exception of all exceptions to help my clients get into this house and get the rate from the day before. And it's what allowed them to buy the house, not only buy the house, but move cross country to LA, completely changed their
Yeah.
life. Then rates went up and demand went down, and some buyers left the market. And I was like, okay. And, I had listed a pretty nice Spanish style home in Venice right around then. And I had had a very good start to the year. So I took a nice 5-week vacation. I went to New York, then I went to the Middle East, and stayed in amazing hotels and felt super relaxed about it. I was in a pretty big escrow. I was in an escrow. I was representing both sides. I was like, this is great. I'll come back. Got a big wire coming, and then that escrow canceled, and then my phone stopped ringing, and I had never experienced a cold market before, and I started to get really nervous. I remember I had a dream one night that I was on the Brooklyn Bridge on the top level, and all of a sudden the metal that held the bridge up snapped, and the bridge collapsed, and I went flying down, and it felt like, holy shit, the bottom of the market's dropping out. What am I going
Yeah.
to do? And I had a real estate coach at the time who's phenomenal. His name is Dave Colwell. Dave used to be the head of growth for Douglas Elliman. And we were doing lots of coaching sessions around it. I was like, okay, I need to build momentum around my business. I don't know what I'm doing. This is crazy. Blah, 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 blah. It was a very stressful 6 months. It took me about 4 to 6 months to like really figure things out and start doing things with consistency. So for the first time, I started like cold calling expires. For the first time, I started door knocking. Had no success with either of those. But I wasn't afraid to try new things. So,
Yeah.
I started like writing handwritten notes to like strangers in, wealthy neighborhoods. None of that stuff worked for me. And then referrals started coming, actually, is what changed everything. End of 22 into 23, I started getting some referrals. And then I started consistently getting referrals. And then things just wonderfully opened up. There are certain memberships that I'm a member of certain private clubs, which it's taken years, but those private memberships are paying off for sure. And I just realized, for me, it's better to invest significantly in high-end social situations, where they be like exotic trips, memberships, um, like destination weddings, whatever the situation is, because I've seen so much business come from those places. And so I doubled down on what worked, and things have really opened up big time.
No, that's great. I mean, I think that's the beauty of real estate, I guess, in general, is that it goes up and down, but it always sort of comes back around. But it really still points to your network. It points to being able to sell in whatever capacity that means, and maybe it means in those by interacting with people through these memberships and all of that. I think it's just being in the position to adapt or take advantage of whatever the scenario is right now, and so it's really great to see that resiliency and your success. um, I'm gonna switch gears, Adam. I want to get to ask you the questions I ask every guest, and I think some I may I may reframe at least one of them, but the first one is always, it's based on the name of the show being Know Your Why, and so I ask every guest, what is your why? You do have, like I said, a very unique background for many of my guests, but what's not necessarily so unique is moving from one career path to another and adapting and having success there, which I think is just a phenomenal lesson. So what is your why? What kind of motivates you? What keeps you going on the hard days? What is that spark inside you?
So my why is creating a beautifully sustainable, prosperous business as the foundation to support a family, and then also to mentor others. There are one thing that I attribute a lot of my success to early on is my practices, my morning spiritual practices, breath work, and guided meditation specifically. And so I'm in the process of building a team right now, and there are a lot of agents who are really competent, they're competent at doing the work, but they haven't figured out the business. And their mindset is part of the reason that they're not successful. It's not that they can't be successful, it's that their paradigm is not where it needs to be, in my opinion, in order for them to be successful. And so what I started doing early on, I had a friend who I told, I'm making this pivot. She got me Joe Dispenza's book and guided meditation. And every morning after my breath work, I would sit in this meditation. I would visualize and feel myself walking out of a brand new car with these incredible shoes at Soho, Malibu, ready to have an extravagant dinner. I'm taking all of my friends out. I'm paying for all of it. It's amazing and life is wonderful. And I would just like feel into that possibility, into that reality day in, day out, day in, day out. No idea how I was going to get there, but it felt very real to me. And so one thing I'm very passionate about is sharing these practices and this magic with other people and allowing them to prosper in the same way. And, right now I'm single currently, but I'm planning on having a family and children. And creating this business is the reason.
Yeah, I the I guess one of the things the theme, I guess, that I've left out of all of this that I feel like you've touched on without saying it is having a vision. It seems like you have obviously a vision for what your future looks like, and in both in business and in personal life. And I think that's maybe another really key take home from this, in the sense that we've talked about adaptability, resiliency. We've talked about mentorship. We talked about providing just an undeniably good service, but also I think just having that vision of what it all looks like. I think is this really very, I guess, useful in being able to move it forward and execute. And so you kind of mentioned, I like the way you put it. You mentioned you're hiring on team members, and they're people that can do the work but don't understand the business. I'm maybe not phrasing it exactly as you did, but I think I understand what you mean there. But I thought it might actually be a good thing to kind of expand on exactly where you're going with that angle.
Yeah. I mean, I recently this week had a conversation with an agent who's been licensed for a few years, has done some deals, doesn't have any consistency in her business. And in my opinion, there are certain things that I do every week. Like for me, real estate can be predictable in my experience. I'm about to launch 6 listings in the next few weeks, which will be for me the most listings I've launched in less than a month. And it's February going into March. It's not like a hot season right now. And I attribute a lot of that to certain practices that I do consistently all the time, like staying what I call like in flow with clients, with people in my network, friends, etc. And so there are a lot of agents who I know who are great negotiators. They know the market well. They are very competent. They know how to navigate escrow as well. What they don't know how to do is attract clients on a consistent basis. They don't know how to do it. And so they live with a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. It's like they haven't figured it out. And so even though their core competency is super high, they and I'm sure that a bunch of them have goals and like a business plan potentially. They don't know how to execute in order to have consistent business quarter after quarter. And so I can help them.
Yeah. Thank you for kind of expanding on it. I think that's really what I thought you meant. And I think it's just a lot of that probably ties in with your ability to sell and being able to sell on, honestly, just mostly it means relating to people, putting yourself, in, as you mentioned, in flow with your clients. It's just being in that space. So I think it's just important for people to understand, like that's really a reality of business. There's the work, but then there's the actual, ability to connect with the customer. And I think that's just a really great way of explaining it all. Adam, when people hear this and they want to reach out to you, they want to connect, what is the best place for them to find you?
Instagram at Adam Brawer, AdamBrawer. My website, www.adambrowerestates.com. Those are probably the two best ways. If they want to reach out directly, my cell phone, 310-279-8259.
Excellent. Well, we will put all that in the show notes, let people find you, especially if they want to buy or sell a home here in LA. So I'll stop there and say thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I know we had our challenges getting it together, but thankful that you are safe with the fires that recently happened, and thankful for having you on the show. So really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
Folks listening, do make sure you connect with Adam, especially if you're looking to buy or sell a home here. But thank you all for listening. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can continue to get great guests. Take care.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?